This is Johnny with TigerBomb MMA, and today I'm going to go over UFC Louisville, which would be Cannonier versus Imavov, giving you my thoughts and predictions on the entire, 14 bout card. Lots of these bouts are interesting, to say the least. I did my research on. You'd be surprised. I did my research, and I didn't automatically, like I wanted to, just fade the Indian woman, because that's been my thing as of late. Like, hey, it's an Indian woman fighting MMA. Better fade her. I had to do research on her. So I'm going to give you my thoughts on this entire card and, kind of break it down, give you my ideas as to what I want to bet. I want to give you also my quick thoughts on UFC 302. That's Wednesday today. I just got back from vacation and the jet lag whipped my ass to the point that I actually thought I had COVID yesterday. I was like, my chest hurts, and no, it was just me being super fucking tired, or that, or just might be the time of like the sun and the moon might be right in the right spots for like us lazy Mexicans get lazier. I don't know, but UFC 302. Let me switch over to that. I was on vacation, and word to the wise, if you have a grand on fights, it'd be wise for you to not travel on that day. So I traveled on Saturday the 1st, and I got on the plane. I made my arrangements to get the internet on the, Wi-Fi on the internet, Wi-Fi on the plane, so I could watch the prelims and hopefully make some money. Long story short, killed it during my vacation, parlayed baseball, live bet basketball, was fucking murdering it, and then baseball reared its ugly bitch face again and destroyed me pretty bad. So I'm like, I got to do something drastic. So I had a grand parlay. Literally, I had $1,000 on a 3-leg parlay, and I needed this Wi-Fi. And I nearly got kicked off the plane. And by nearly, I mean pretty nearly, actually. I got into it with the stewardess. Anyways, story for a different day. But first fight of the night, I didn't really watch everything live. I had to go back once I landed. I'll tell you a funny story when it gets to the person that I needed on this parlay on the 3-leg, which it did cash. It was what it was. Like, I made my money back. I lost $1,000 on fucking sports during my vacation, but I made my money back on a plus 119 parlay. But I had Andre Lima defeating Mitch Raposo. Went back, rewatched it. It was a split decision, which really confused me, because when I landed back home, I saw the ESPN app, and to me it looked like Mitch Raposo beat Lima via split decision. So because it had what I thought the winners on the left-hand side and the losers on the right-hand side, not knowing that it actually had the red corner with the blue corner, and then it pointed to whoever the winner was. But yeah, I was like, what the fuck? Like, it made me question at that very brief moment. I'm like, am I a moron? How did that happen? Did Mitch just become a great wrestler? Did Andre Lima, like, I know he missed weight. So I was like, there's a bullet waiting for me at home if this happened. Luckily, I went back, rewatched it. Everything made sense. Andre Lima, 30-27, this kid. And whoever that judge was, I don't remember who the judge was, because there was a controversial scorecard, obviously here and with the Strickland card. I don't want to talk shit on the judge, because I'm actually doing some judging this Friday. And they're very, like, hey, maybe don't talk shit about fellow judges. But let's just say I didn't agree with that scorecard. I thought Andre easily won. Eileen Perez defeating Jocelyn Edwards. I had her to win as well, just kind of using that big booty power to lay on top of her, which she did well. But Jocelyn Edwards, credit to her, she was able to reverse a couple times. The only thing I didn't like is that she actually ate that spinning back fist from Perez, which was concerning. Other than that, Perez, I thought, barely edged it. I thought it was a pretty honest fight, and Jocelyn was holding her own on the ground. It's just that she kept losing position. It was what it was. Basil Hafez defeats Mickey Gall. I had Basil to win. Basil Hafez to win. And when I initially landed, again, as I mentioned, Mickey Gall was on the left-hand side. Basil was on the right-hand side, so I assumed that Mickey Gall dominated Basil. So I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I lost another $1,000. What the fuck am I going to do? Luckily, like, that sense of dread easily like dissipated when I found out that I was just an idiot and I was not reading the app correctly. It's not that the winners are on the left hand side. It's just, again, it points to them. So with Basil still on my parlay, I was like, okay, don't have to kill myself. We're good. Went back, rewatched the fight. It was an honest fight. Mickey Gall, didn't completely suck. To me, it was more that Hafez was kind of trying way too hard to look spectacular, and in doing so, he made the fight a lot closer than it needed to be. He could have gotten top control. He wanted to knock out Mickey Gall. Mickey, I don't want to say rocked him. That is the word I suppose we can use for Hafez getting rocked. But the thing about Hafez, he does eat some shots, and it kind of puts him loopy for a second, but he never is fully rocked. So it's kind of hard to really describe it. But I thought that was really going to hurt him with that judge's scorecard, but unanimous decision there. So parlay was still alive. Phil Rowe kind of cucked it for me because, oh man, I thought he was going to win. I thought Jake Matthews would find a way to lose. Phil Rowe, I think, was the better fighter. It's just that I do think that, if I recall correctly, because again, I watched these really late after being jet lagged, Phil Rowe was winning the first round, busted up Jake. There was a nut shot. There was a break. Jake Matthews kind of got mad about it, and then he hurt Phil Rowe, which kind of swayed that round for Jake, and I believe one of the scorecards. At that point, it looks like Phil Rowe really couldn't recover. He looked just off. Like, he just wasn't with his wits. He didn't have that kind of swagger. He lost the second round. The third round, he could have won it, but he went for a really ill-advised takedown. Like, he just dug in there, and Jake was able to reverse him, get on top, and Phil Rowe lost the fight. It was a little disappointing, but if I'm going to be honest with you, man, like, it might have been a good thing for Phil Rowe to be in that spot where he could definitely learn from that type of loss, and then maybe down the line, they're obviously going to give him a better fight moving forward, right? They're not going to like try. Well, they might try to feed him to somebody. You know what I'm saying? They might try to feed him to like an up and coming star. I doubt that. I think Phil Rowe has a lot of marketability to him. I think he can produce spectacular fights and knockouts. So I think this fight, I really do think he might have been hurt. I'm not trying to make excuses for the guy, but he could have easily beat Jake Matthews, with props to Jake. Grant Dawson was on my second leg of my parlay, and I was sweating it, man. I was telling people, like, hey, is there a way Grant can lose? Because my assessment was Joe by sub, Joe just money line, because straight money line on Grant was rough. But again, I was in a desperate situation, so I put him on a parlay with the money line, and instantly dives in there and he gets caught in a guillotine. But it wasn't necessarily the tightest guillotine. It was tight in the sense of like grip, but the legs weren't fully around his waist. And then Grant just kind of took over that first round, and then afterwards just coasted to a victory, because Joe, as I didn't say this, but someone put it as Joe being and this was PayPal my money, Joe is I guess a queer back jiu-jitsu guy. Like, he's always on his back. He likes being on his back, and he kind of proved it there. Like, there was moments where Grant Dawson was just walking him down, and Joe walked himself to the back of the cage and then just kind of accepted his fate, almost like he was really enjoying what was happening to him by Grant Dawson. But yeah, second leg cashed. I was like, okay, we're going here, we're cooking. Jailton Almeida defeats Alexander Romanov. I said Almeida first round, or at that point live bet Romanov. Yeah, Almeida needed to do what he needed to do. He actually got the sub. I thought he was going to be able to actually TKO Romanov, make him quit. But I think when he got essentially a neck crank on Romanov, that really softened him up enough for him to be able to get the tap later on in that round. Didn't bet him. Didn't feel comfortable betting him. He was like, minus 300. This was like a do or die for Almeida for us to continue calling him God King, or at least that's what I call him. And we can still call him God King. He's able to really dispel and beat the shit out of these fat heavyweights. So we'll see what happens when he fights solid competition. Maybe a good striker. Let's just say a Cyril Gane. A Cyril Gane, I think, is going to give him a ton of trouble. But again, we know Cyril Gane is... his grappling isn't necessarily the best. Let's go with that. Roman Kopylov defeats Cesar Almeida. That should not have been a split decision. Excuse me. Almeida looked good in the second round. He won the second round, but Kopylov was just able to time those kind of looping punches that Almeida was trying to land and get back. Kopylov got allergies. Excuse me. Kopylov would land something. Almeida would get a little too riled up trying to get that strike back. And then Kopylov just shot for like a really shitty takedown, got him down. Didn't do much with the top control, but it was enough for him to win the fight. I really expected more from Almeida, but again, he was a 5-0 fighter at the time, and he still has a lot of upside, even though he's like 36 years old. I do expect more from him. Maybe when he works out being able to get back up in the middle of the cage, I think he's going to be a bit more dangerous when he stops telegraphing those shots. A guy like Roman Kopylov, who's not a good takedown artist, he really couldn't do much to Almeida. Yeah, it was a good eye opener for me. Maybe I shouldn't have felt that confident against a guy with a ton of experience. But yeah, anyways, Randy Brown defeats Zaleski. I took Zaleski as a pick. Randy Brown looked good in the first round. He really did what I expected Randy Brown to do, minus the knockout. I thought Randy Brown was going to be able to just knock out Zaleski. If he didn't knock out Zaleski, Zaleski at that point would be live, which for a brief moment he was. Zaleski actually rocked Brown in the second round, took his back, nearly submitted him, then rode out the fight with some control time up until Randy Brown. I guess he mustered up the courage to not be a simp and reversed Zaleski at the like very last minute of the second round and started putting up some damage on him. At that point, Randy Brown took over, won the decision. Randy Brown is one of these guys that I just would never feel comfortable with against a guy who can shut off his lights. And Zaleski, he wobbled them at that point. So, had I bet Randy Brown, I would have won, but I also would have been sweating my ass off. Nico Price defeats Alex Morono. I had picked, I believe, Morono. Don't remember, didn't care. This fight didn't matter. Morono should have won in the first round. My Russian link, if you know what I'm saying, as I was driving back home, kept kind of crashing on me, so didn't really watch the whole fight. But I saw that Morono, at one point, it kind of froze on him having Nico Price in like an omoplata, where he could have actually gone, put his left arm around the neck and maybe cranked it and gotten a choke, but have no idea how Nico got out of it. All I know is that Nico took over after the second round because Morono was just incredibly gassed. As for Morono, I know he took the fight on short notice, but I really thought he was going to have at least enough to win 2 rounds for Nico Price. So, he just did what he needed to do. If you cash Nico Price, props on you. If you cashed him possibly live, I don't know what the live odds were, but I'm assuming Morono won the first round. Next bout, Kevin Holland defeats Mikhail Olenjejczyk. Really beautiful armbar setup by Kevin. You forget how good of a jiu-jitsu guy he is. Like, he is a black belt in jiu-jitsu. And Olenjejczyk, it sucks that he tends to be in spots where he can obviously win a fight. Like, he was walking down Kevin. He was making him uncomfortable. And he caught him pretty well. He didn't necessarily rock him, I don't think. I think he caught him off balance because Kevin was throwing a kick. He kind of looped it overhand right that dropped Kevin. He got a little overexcited, and then he got literally, I don't even know if Kevin set up the armbar because it was like telegraphed a mile away, but Mikhail left his arm in there, and then at that point, like, he tried to escape, but we saw what happened. Mikhail saying that his arm isn't broken, but that shit was pretty nasty. But yeah, Kevin looked good. He goes out there, shakes Trump's hand. It was pretty dope. Sean Strickland defeats Paulo Costa. I will be blunt as a judge myself. I thought the first few rounds were really close. I thought Sean was definitely landing the better volume. He was actually landing clean, and Paulo was landing the harder shots, more visually pleasing. But I still would have gone with, like, by the slightest edge, given him the Sean Strickland, but I wouldn't have been like, oh no, how dare you give round number 1 or 2 to Costa. After round number 3, there was like a checked kick from Sean Strickland to Costa that hurt his leg, and I'm like, he's going to take over. I expected him to like start steamrolling him, but the issue with Sean, who was my final leg on my parlay, which cashed me out. I don't have proof that I actually did it because I didn't have time to actually like track this shit, so you're going to have to take my word on it. The issue with Sean is that as I'm watching the fight, I'm feeling confident that he's winning, but I also feel doubt that he might lose like a fuckery decision, which I was shitting bullets when I heard that first scorecard of 49-46 for Costa. I was like, son of a bitch. Like, how did they see that? Like, is it just that Costa is more jacked and he's just throwing harder bombs even though they're not landing, and Sean tends to fight a little too close sometimes, although he is not getting touched? It's just the way Sean fights sometimes. I was a little worried. Luckily, the second two judges weren't complete fucking idiots, and they got the fight right. But I thought Costa fought valiantly. I thought he looked good in the fourth and the fifth round. I thought he was going to win the fifth up until Sean actually started fighting, and he looked dominant at that point. But unnecessary from Sean. He already had to win. But yeah, good win for Sean. For Paulo Costa, he is promising to bring back the old Paulo Costa, the eraser, the guy who goes forward. Like, I love Paulo. I really do like Paulo. I want to see him succeed. It's just we need to see that guy back, where if that guy were to show up here, not a guy who's just trying to be more strategic and try to conserve his energy, he could have had a good chance against Sean, where he could have just done more damage. I think had Paulo done it just a little bit more when it came to landing cleanly to the body, he was doing really well. It's just that he clearly was trying to conserve his energy, and that's not a game you want to play with Sean Strickland, who can out-volume you. But I'm not here to complain. Like, I cashed my bet, and I am currently losing more of that money on baseball. So I do have a parlay for the next fight that hoping it plays out well. Islam Makhachev defeats Dustin Poirier. I was contemplating kind of going big on Makhachev, but I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm not going to fuck with this. Like, I'm driving back home. I'm watching this shit on my phone. Let's just see what happens. And, Dustin gave him an honest fight. He bloodied him up. It kind of proved that Islam is definitely good. He just doesn't have that kind of dominance, the ability to be that dominant. Maybe his wrestling isn't as great as Khabib, and we obviously compare them because they were trained by the same guy and they're, his coach now. It's just that, like, Islam has shown a lot of vulnerability, but he also has shown a lot of heart. As much as I don't like Islam and I want him to lose, it's still kind of impressive that he was able to tap out Dustin Poirier, a guy who I actually don't like as much. So I was very happy to see him get the sub. I was happy to see him put Dustin out, and again, to seeing Dustin cry. Just made my day very well. And got home, rewatched some of these fights. Not a great card, not a bad card. It was a decent card. There was not any knockouts. One submission, I think. It was what it was. It was or two submissions, I suppose. But yeah, it was a fine fight card. So let's get on to the Louisville card. Again, 14 bouts, first fight of the night. Again, for the love of God, I am breaking down Puja Tomar versus Rayanne Amanda. Tomar, the Cyclone, plus 195. Minus 240 for Rayanne. Her name is Dos Santos, so I'll just call her Amanda in this spot. But, I just want to say I tend to fade the Indian women. I do it on the road to UFC. It's been profitable for me. I just literally make the bet the night before when I find out that they're actually having road to UFC because they don't advertise. I wake up and I'm like, I made money, hooray. In this spot, I actually did my research on Tomar. She's a karate gal, taekwondo. She's a scrappy girl. I'll give her that. She's very scrappy. She's a fighter. She will go out there and try to perform. But I do think that she is, she's obviously 8-4, as you can see on the, I guess you can't see it because we're blocking it with my big fucking head. But she's 8-4. She's 5'1". She's 30 years old, and she's Indian. And when I say that, it's not because, she's Indian, she sucks. It's that the Indian MMA scene isn't quite there yet. She does have the skill set, though, when it comes to traditional martial arts, where she can keep it on the feet if she can. If, say, Amanda wants to, I'm going to knock her out, because Amanda has good power. She has kind of a weird, goofy skill set, I suppose. Like, on paper, she looks amazing, but in practice, it's... fuck, why aren't you doing more, bitch, essentially? Because against Alencar, I thought she was going to just continue doing what she was doing, stuffing takedowns, landing shots, and then she stopped fighting for a bit. Alencar being the more scrappy of the two because she needed to get it to the ground, and she couldn't. She was just throwing a little bit more, being a bit more active, where Amanda, having the good takedown defense, and I think the harder punches and maybe the better combinations, she just maybe was a little too afraid of getting taken down, because in that second round against Alencar, that's what happened. She got dominated. But when you see her outside the UFC in Invicta, she's dominating girls, and she has a solid skill set. She's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Again, her takedown defense is decent. Her output isn't great visually sometimes, but in this spot, I think if she doesn't just completely go brain dead, she should just take her to the ground and submit her very easily. Take her down, bust her up. In her UFC, not UFC, her one fight, Tomar, that is, against Stamp Vertex. Stamp got her to the ground. Not even like takedown. She just happened to fall on the ground by throwing a kick, because Tomar throws a lot of like side kicks and a lot of traditional martial arts kicks. She does throw very nice like side kicks to the body, like very, again, taekwondo karate style, which I like. But you can put her to the ground, grab the leg, drop her down, and then if Amanda gets on top, I think at that point, if Stamp Fairtex, who, granted, I think she's better than both these girls because she has put in the time, the work, and she has that mentality of a fighter. Amanda, on the other hand, although she has the accolades of black belt, if she doesn't use it, like, what's the point? You know, she's going to try to strike with Tomar, and at that point, it's like more of a 50-50 matchup. If Amanda comes out here, takes her to the ground, and just subs her and dominates her, it's all sunshine and rainbows. The fading the Indian women plan goes according to plan. But if, and I spend too much fucking time talking about it, because like if I had to watch these fights and you're watching this fucking video, you're gonna hear me talking bitch about Tomar. If Tomar can avoid getting taken down and keep it on the feet and kind of lull Amanda into a striking matchup, she can definitely win this by a decision. I don't know if she'll knock her out, but she'll definitely outpoint her. That is something that I think Amanda to me has who is that dude's name? The guy with like the girl that's way too hot for him. I'm blanking out on his name. He fought at heavyweight in the UFC. And who did he fight? He fought Romanov. Let's see who Romanov fought. Give me a second here. Like, once I remember his name, I'd be like, oh, of course, it's that moron here. Because you never go full Jared Vandera. So, Amanda Dos Santos reminds me so much of Jared Vandera, where he has a black belt in jiu-jitsu, he has serviceable striking, but he is Jared Vandera. And I think she might be Amanda Rayanne Vandera, where if she doesn't do the smart technique and take it to the ground, she might lose this fight. But again, I think that she's also capable of being like, I'm the better striker, I'm going to prove it, and then she ends up losing this fight. I'm going to take her by submission round number 1. But again, if anything, I would take Amanda by finish. Other than that, no interest. Next bout here, we've got Cody Stamann, the Spartan, versus Dildo Impact Taylor Laplius. Laplius minus 210, come back on Spartan. Cody Stamann plus 175. I think this is going to be a very honest to goodness striking matchup where Cody's going to try to get it to the ground. Taylor has decent and more improved takedown defense. I think Taylor is the more dynamic of the two when it comes to the striking. He's a solid kickboxer, right? Like, he's a solid guy, MMA Factory. He's going to have the reach advantage. I think he's going to have, obviously, the skill advantage when it comes to striking. But if Cody can kind of disrupt that striking with some takedown defense, some takedown attempts, he could possibly steal it. It's a very close fight. It's kind of a dog or pass. I don't think Lapilis is a guy you really want to bet right now, especially against a guy who can mix in takedowns. If it's another striker, say Cody has no wrestling background, and just Taylor would style on him. He would decision him. Cody's tough. He's a dog fighter. He'll come out here and he'll win fights you don't expect him to win, but he's a solid dude, but he's nothing particularly special. And I have to say, his last fight, I thought he beat Douglas De Silva de Andrade, and on top of that, I thought he got fully fucked, because in that first round, he got essentially position taken away from him. He got the takedown on Douglas, and then the ref, I forgot if there was a foul, but they took away position, and he's like, what the fuck, dude? Like, because at that point, I think Douglas was edging out that round very close, and then I think he did eventually steal that round, but they stole it from Cody, because had he gotten the top control, he could have won based off of that control time, or maybe even done some damage and got a finish. We'll never know. But yeah, they fucked him pretty bad. So I'm not taking that in consideration and being like, oh, he lost to Douglas Silva. Granted, Douglas was able to stuff a couple of his takedowns, and I think Taylor, being more athletic, I think he's going to be able to do that. So I will take Lapilis by a decision. But with say Taylor not being like uber aggressive and having a lot of flash to him, like maybe a lot of power. He's more of a I don't want to say he's like a decision fighter because he has gotten finishes in the past because he has that diversity. He can maybe catch, Cody Stamann lacking and knock him out. The thing is, if Cody decides to say, hey, fuck it, I don't want to go for these takedowns, maybe they're not working, maybe feinting for takedowns isn't working, and he decides to just go out there and just fist it out, he's got a good chance to edge out this fight. If it becomes like a honest to goodness, like we're out in the back just beating the shit out of each other, Cody can definitely win this. So plus money on Cody, not too bad. But if it is going to be just a standard Taylor Laplius fight where he is stuffing takedowns, I think he's going to be able to get more of the cleaner shots off, better at kicking, and he just kind of keeps Cody at bay, stuffs the takedowns, and wins a pretty obvious decision, but it'll be a lot closer than what you would kind of expect, and more so than what the line says. But I'll go with Taylor by decision. Eduardo Moura, minus 175, come back on Denise Gomes, plus 145. With this one, Eduardo Moura, she is what I like to call the God Queen of the division at strawweight. She is obviously like a heavy grappler. She's huge for the division. She missweight her last fight, and she handled Montserrat Ruiz as you were supposed to. You beat the shit out of her on the ground. She is dominant on the ground. She gets you out to the ground. She is going to be dominant. She will handle Denise Gomes. And my issue here, she should be, let's just be honest, she should be minus 300 based off of her skill set. And let me finish before you like turn off the TV or stop punching the camera or stop punching the screen. She should be minus 300, but because she doesn't have the striking and she isn't quite proven yet, she's only 10-0 against Denise Gomes, a woman who's won in the UFC. She's fought better competition. The odds have to be more realistic. I think this is a lot closer if, say, Denise Gomes hasn't proven that she kind of gets not necessarily dominated on the mat, because she does pretty decently at getting back up and like using her underhooks and just avoiding getting fully controlled on bottom, because I think she does have BJJ credentials. The thing is, though, with Moura being a specialist, I think she's a brown belt. She trains with Gelton Almeida, the God King. Being so big, she flows so fucking well on the mat. She is just uber dominant, and she's not content with just necessarily searching for a sub. She will beat the shit out of you with ground and pound. And all it really takes is for Denise to fall to her back, and Mora's going to take over. Where Denise can win is that Mora's striking is kind of shit, right? And she does kind of keep her head high, and Denise Gomes has knocked out a taller, lankier girl in that one cunt. Can't even remember her name. Bruna Brazil. So there's a chance here that Denise Gomes could crack her and knock her the fuck out. But we don't know how good her chin is. We don't know how good her defense is. We don't know how smart she is because, again, she's only 10-0. There's a lot of question marks here. What I do know is that if Denise Gomes hits the ground with Moura, whether it be Gomes takes her down for whatever reason, Moura will sweep her. She'll get on top, use her big body, and then just find a finish, or just uber dominate her for 3 rounds. We'll have to see if she makes weight, if she looks awful making the weight. For me, it's Moura, and I'm going to go with submission second round. Not because it's like, oh, I suspect that Gomes is going to get subbed. I just think that between the two, between the TKO and the sub, both are very likely. I think that Gomes is going to maybe do enough off the bottom to avoid getting the TKO. Maybe try to, like, I don't know, get butterfly hooks and whatnot. I think it's going to be a lot easier for Moura using her longer limbs to try to search for a submission against a smaller girl here. So she'll have a 3-inch reach advantage and a 4-inch height advantage over Gomes. But it's a tough fight for sure. But Gomes, I've always kind of suspected that she sucks, but she does have power, right? She does have power, and she can run through certain types of girls, but more skilled girls, especially girls that can grapple. And I do suspect that Moura is the grappler in that division currently and kind of making waves. We'll have to see what she ends up becoming, but I will go with Moura by a submission. Next bout, Daniel Marcos versus John Castaneda. Near pick'em here, minus 110, minus 110. it's kind of dropped that Marcos is becoming more of like plus even money or minus 105. It's a honest to goodness fist fight here. Both guys, very good strikers. John Castaneda, wrestling background. I like both guys. It's a very good fight. This to me might be my most anticipated fight of the card because it's two good strikers and we've got one guy that can get it to the ground, that can get control time, but he kind of tends to gas out a little bit. And Daniel Marcos, a guy who has decent takedown defense. It's pretty solid, but I can't say it's decent because he hasn't really. I can only say it's decent because he hasn't fought anyone that is that good at takedowns. I think John is going to be a good test here, where he's not the greatest wrestler. He likes to strike, likes to box. And I will say, if Sexy Mexi here, John Castaneda comes out with a mustache, he should be minus 150. No mustache, definitely dead pick him. But when it comes to both these guys, I like what Daniel does more. I really like the way he attacks the body. I like the way he throws knees up the middle. He throws beautiful teeps. He's got a good jab. And my one deciding factor as to why I'm picking Marcos is that he does have good eyes. And what I mean by that is defensively. He's always paying attention to his opponent. He's not the most defensive fighter. He can get hit, but I think he minimizes that by just really focusing on his opponent. He's not overthinking things. He just kind of moves out of the way. Good movement. As for John, his path to victory, a couple different ways. Try to get it to the ground. Obviously, try to like sneak something by because John, he uses a lot of movement. And I do suspect that with the body shots that Marcos is going to be landing, it's eventually going to sap away at John. And while I don't fully expect John to be able to like completely dominate Marcos in the wrestling, I do expect him to kind of clinch him up against the cage where Marcos will start landing body shots. Maybe not super significant shots, but they will take a toll on Castaneda come the second round. He'll be a little bit more tired. And then at that point, John is a little bit slower. Marcos starts to kind of close the gap, perhaps, when it comes to like visually who's winning this fight. And then come the third round, maybe John at that point is going to be tired from getting blasted to the body with those really beautiful teep kicks and also the jab from Daniel Marcos, where he can find a finish in the third round. So I will go with Marcos third round TKO. This could go to a split decision. They're both very good. It just depends on will the cardio of John hold up for those 3 rounds, where a guy is going to be attacking his body pretty consistently, or will Daniel Marcos's takedown defense hold up against a decent enough wrestler, where to me, I don't think he's actually fought that much of a, credentialed wrestler here. So I will go Marcos by third round TKO. I do have him on a parlay already. I think I got him at like minus 105 along with some other people. Next bout, Andrea KGB Lee versus Montana De La Rosa. It's literally the battle of the fucking losers of the division. I won't spend too much time. I'm going to go with Montana by a decision. I know Andrea beat Montana years ago. I don't think it's the same Andrea Lee. And that's really all I'm basing this off of. Like, Andrea, the better fighter on paper, right? She's got good Muay Thai. I think she dates better men. But on the opposite end, I think Montana's a lot cuter. That's all I can base this off of. And, she dates Hispanics, so ugh. Wait a minute. I'm Hispanic. She might date me. Well, she's got a kid. Never mind. But, yeah, 29 years old versus 39. I got to go with the youth here. Although Montana, it's Montana De La Rosa, right? Like, she can definitely surprise you. I think she's still hungry. As for KGB Lee, I think she mentally feels like she can still do it, but physically I see her in these fights and she just like freezes up, like she has nothing left. As for like Montana, I think she still wants to compete. I still think she has that energy, that drive. I've seen her Instagram pictures for science, of course, because I'm looking at her lifting heavy shit. And I'm thinking, yeah, she's working on her strength and conditioning where she can get takedowns on Andrea Lee, get some control time. This could go to a split decision. But yeah, I'll go with Montana De La Rosa. Not because I'm like, oh, wow, she's an underdog or anything. I'm basing this fully on, I believe Andrea Lee is. She might wake up and retire. That's what I'm going with. Like she to me looks like she doesn't have it in the cage anymore. Maybe in training she feels good because it's not live, active, competition. And that happens a lot, especially with these older fighters, and she's not old, she's 35, but she's been fighting for a long fucking time, and she just has not looked visually the same. And although I do think she has, some left in the gas tank where she could definitely come out here and beat Montana and then retire, to me, Montana's always been this kind of girl that despite she being outmatched, she never stops fighting. She continues to try to win. And for that reason, I've always kind of been a fan of Montana. That, and she's a cutie pie. So I'm going to go with Montana by a decision. Next bout, we've got Brad Katona versus Jesse Butler. Katona's like maybe minus 600 at this point. Jesse Butler plus 380. You cannot go against Katona by decision. I think he can even get a finish along the way. He is the much better fighter. He's just a good grappler. He should have beaten Garrett Armfield, but to me, that fight, it just showed the biggest weakness with Brad Katona is that he expects to win these decisions by doing fuck all. Garrett was doing well with the boxing. He was landing cleanly on Brad. Frankly, I did think Brad won that fight. Maybe I'm an idiot. Maybe I shouldn't be judging this Friday night. But I thought he did the more damaging shots, and he had at least the control time to kind of negate some of that early, damage, essentially, that Armfield was landing. And I really like Garrett Armfield. I've been a fan of his. Shit, call me 15-unit Garrett Armfield because I cashed 15 units. Not really. I just, I was saying that, like, just fucking bet Garrett Armfield against that Tomiyami bullshit guy, and he knocked him the fuck out in the first round. But my biggest issue with Armfield in this fight is that he's going to slow down. The issue that I had with Brad is that Garrett did slow down, but Brad didn't do shit all to continuously get him gas. So come the second round, Garrett kind of had a second win. He kind of recovered a bit with that minute, and Brad didn't do shit, and he just kind of waited for Armfield to gas himself out, landing shots on him, and then he held him up against the cage. Like, dude, you got to do shit more than that. And that's essentially what cost him the fight. You know what I mean? Like, he did some decent enough work in the third, but Brad has always been that kind of guy that you can never get a solid, definitive performance from him, but he has put on some good performances, and he's got some good wins against Jesse Butler. He's fighting a tall guy who's dropping down in 2 weight classes. Obviously, not necessarily it was, 2 years ago? Shit, damn. That was less than a year ago that he got knocked out by Jim Miller at lightweight. Jesse, he's a tall dude. He's got long reach. He's a decent enough MMA fighter. I don't think he's a good UFC fighter, but we'll see. This is a very good matchup for Brad to get his confidence back, to kind of style on a guy like Jesse Butler. And if he cannot do that, it's kind of gives you a good idea if Brad still belongs in the UFC. He just definitely won the tough competition where he beat, what's his fucking name, that loser, Cody Gibson. But then we saw how shitty Cody Gibson looked, so maybe they're in the same league now. For Jesse, if he comes out here and beats Brad Katona, I don't think that's because Jesse's so good, and especially him dropping back to bantamweight. I think it's just because Brad may no longer have it. And he's still very young. And I always joke about Brad, and tell me if you think this is true, but I think Brad, when I see him talk and his eyes and his glasses, he gives me the impression that there are hostages in his basement that he very politely yet very sternly asks them each and every time he goes down there to feed them, like, do you want to dance with me? Do you want to dance with me? And they're like, let me go, Brad. Let me go. I'll just take off the wig off me. Well, you don't want to dance with me? He gives me that weird, he's not going to kill you. He's going to let time kill you because he's not going to let you go. But that'd be really funny. If I ever have a chance to meet Brad and he's cool, I'll probably try to do a skit like that with him. But other than that, I think Brad's the better fighter for now. Moving on, we've got Chuck Buffalo Charles Radtke versus the Nightmare Carlos Prates. Welterweight bout, minus 200 for Prates. I think he's ballooned up quite a bit. And then Charlie Radtke is plus 165. I like Charlie for a couple reasons. Primarily, obviously, because I like his post-fight interviews and his speeches and shit. I think that's funny. When I've taped him prior to his UFC debut, I actually picked Blood Diamond to beat him because I see the issues with Charlie Radtke, that he's 9-3. He's a former lightweight. He's had issues at lightweight, but at 170 he does have the power, as I call it. as he calls it, not me, I don't call it this, but he calls his left hook the faggot killer. And I mean, like, I can't argue with that. He took care of one the last time against Gilbert Urbina, and he finds a way to land it so cleanly. And as a guy who, like, I box quite a bit, like at home, I have like the little reflex balls and shit, and I try to like perfect my left hook. The way he can just pinpoint land it with full power is very impressive. Carlos Prates, he's 18-6. He's a solid guy. It's just that his last fight did leave like a sour taste in my mouth where he was losing to Trevin Giles. And then had he not knocked out Giles, I think he would have lost that fight. He couldn't get the ball rolling, and I'm not going to hold that against him. I think he can definitely win this fight here, but I don't feel comfortable laying the chalk on Prates to possibly get knocked out by the F-word killer by Charles Radtke. I think he does have the wrestling upside, the jiu-jitsu upside, but the range is going to be at Prates' range, where he is that much better of a kickboxer, where he's not going to be afraid to get hit like Urbina was, who was just backing up like a pussy. I think Prates, this is going to be the fight where he actually shows off how good he is, because he is good. He has a lot of upside to him. When he finds his range, he does have power. He does lay into you. But I rather see this fight play out than actually give like a definitive statement, because I do think Charlie is a pretty decent dog here. Because Prates, if you kind of crowd him with those long ass arms, like you crowd him in there and you do have the power to hurt him, man, I'm just for science. I want to see what that left hook would do to Prates if it lands clean. But I do have to go with Prates to win this fight. I'm going to say in the later rounds, like round number 2 or 3, Charlie, I think his IQ has definitely gotten better. I think he does train with that douchebag. What's his name? Bilal Muhammad. So I do think his overall MMA game has kind of developed itself to being more win oriented than, I guess it's all win oriented, but like he's definitely gotten better than what he was outside the UFC. So it's really hard to gauge him, and it's really hard to gauge him just because he knocked out Gilbert Urbina doesn't mean he's going to knock out Prates. It just is what it is. Like, I cannot judge Prates off of his worst performance, which was the last fight, and I can't judge Charlie off of his best performance, which was his last fight. So I think it's going to be an honest fight here. And I think if Prates finds his distance and his distance management early, and he makes Charlie kind of like panic a bit, I think he can pick him apart and then finish him late. So I will go with Prates, second round TKO. Next bout, we've got Moises here, Thiago Moises versus Ludwig Klein. Ludwig Klein is minus 135. Come back on Moises plus 115. I've already parlayed Klein, and the reason for it, I think at 155, obviously his body has gotten bigger, and I think he's just developed himself into a solid mixed martial artist instead of just a devastating kickboxer. He came into the UFC, knocked out Shane Young with a head kick and I think an uppercut, and then he had some success at 145, and then he had some kind of stinkers where he was the better fighter. It's just, to me, it almost looked like the weight cut just took it out of him. He moves up to 155 and he looks absolutely amazing. Like he's just coming into his own in his body, and he is just developing his skill set to be able to fight these solid guys at 155. As for Thiago Moises, he's a good dude as well. Like, we saw what he did to Mitch Ramirez, and granted, both of their last fights, they fought much weaker competition, and they handled them accordingly. Ludwig Klein, as much as I like AJ Cunningham, I like AJ Cunningham a lot. Like, I really do. I wish the best for him. I want to see him fight in the UFC. I want to see him beat some motherfuckers' asses, because he's the kind of guy, like, he can take an ass whooping, and then, like, later you gas out beating his ass, and then he comes back and whips your ass even worse. I want to see that. But he handled him pretty standard. Like, he took care of business. As for Moises, he fought Mitch Ramirez, and he did better. You know, Mitch is a bigger dude, and he TKO'd, leg kicked him. And I think Moises is in that sphere where he's feeling himself. He feels more confident. It's just that when I see Moises fight and he has adversity, he will break. I think Klein might be past that. And this is a very tough fight, because they're both very good fighters. And if Moises does get this to the ground, I think he can dominate Klein. But I think Klein's overall MMA game, his wrestling, offense, and defense has gotten definitely better, mostly because he's on some of that good Flintstones vitamins where he is jacket up the ass. Maybe that's what he have to do. He has to stick him up his ass, and that way he like harnesses the the PEDs very well. Whatever he is on, natural or unnatural, he's looking good. And I think this is going to be one of these spots where he might put on a clinic on Moises. And at those odds, at minus 135, I'm willing to take that shot, knowing damn well that Moises is a very good fighter. But again, if Benoit Saint Denis can break you like that, and I mean, he broke this boy to the point that he just made him stop fighting. And that really was hard to watch. I think Klein could maybe hurt him with something clean, something hard, and maybe he can just dominate the entire fight, where Moises is just kind of on backup energy mode, and all he does is fight to not get finished. And that's kind of the idea that I get from Moises, where if you stand up to this guy and you kind of start whooping on him a little bit, he will either call it a day, but more than likely he won't be the same fighter that he was in the first round if you kind of put it on him. So for that reason, I got to go with Klein, but it's not going to be an easy fight. If Moises comes out here with that confidence of him saying, like, you know what, that Benoit Saint Denis fight was just a weird anomaly. He's a good fighter. He fought the number one contender in Dustin, and he ended up losing that fight. It's no shame that I lost against him, and he kind of whipped my ass because he's a big dude, and he gets in that right mental state. I can see him having a good performance against Klein, but I have to go with Klein just because I haven't seen him pussy out. So I'll go with Klein. I'm going to go by a decision here. Next bout, Punahele Soriano dropping down to 170 against Miguel Baeza. Oh, shit. Okay, minus 170 for Baeza. Come back on Puna, plus 140. This one's tough because there are so many questions when it comes to Baeza, who hasn't fought in, 2 years? And Puna, who's dropping down to 170. If Puna can make 170 safely, can he... Damn. There's just so much. Can he fight intelligently to try to crack the chin of Baeza? Can he cut that distance to try to hit Baeza? Baeza is the better fighter between the two. Better everywhere. Distance management, kicks, punches, combinations, setting up his punches. Puna just loves throwing that fucking left hand. His last fight was a really, really poor performance from him. Although he was landing on Stoltzfus, and we'll talk about Stoltzfus in a bit, it was like, bro, throw a fucking jab. What are you doing here? Set up your fucking punches. And that's the biggest worry, because if Baeza, being the better fighter, Punahele does have more power, I think. I would hope so, if he's not like fully tapped out at welterweight. He's a pretty big laddie boy at 185. The issue is Baeza does have a suspect chin, obviously. He's been knocked out twice, and he's been knocked out by decent competition. Obviously, Chaos Williams put him out, but he didn't put him out with just one punch. He took it into the third round. He got hit, and he got finished. As for Fiallo, although Fiallo at the time was kind of a killer, what was really hard to see is that he got caught up in close with like an uppercut, something kind of short, and that really wobbled him. And that's what I'm worried about Puna, who loves to just lunge. And if he can land on Baeza, he's going to whip his ass. He's going to probably rock him. There's just so many questions. Like, he's been away for about 2 years, obviously. 2 years, 1 month for Baeza. He is the better fighter. I do expect him to even finish Puna, because even at this point, if Puna is getting dropped by Stoltzfus by like a shitty little punch, I think Baeza, with a more compromised, less hydrated, less water in the brain Puna, he can definitely knock him out. It's fucking hard, though. Like, this is like that type of fight that I want no part of. Like, hey, Johnny, what do you think on this fight? Like, leave me the fuck alone. I'm not going to answer. That's how I feel about it, because there's just so many factors in this fight that you can only see live. If Puna is that same guy and he's not able to cut that distance, we've seen that he just doesn't have the mental capacity, the fight IQ. Like, he's got the athleticism. He can wrestle. This guy has all the skills. Not the skills, but he's got all the physical attributes to be able to beat Miguel Baeza without even trying to, like, strike with him. He can just bulldoze him, take him to the ground, and just ride him out. But I don't think that's Puna's style. It's so hard because Puna, to me, as much as I see him and I see what he's capable of, he's always kind of had that fight IQ issue. And although he trains at Extreme Couture, I thought by now he would have been getting it. Miguel Baeza, skill set wise, is leagues above Puna. It's just damn, man. Like, is he gonna get cracked? Is Puna just gonna like lunge at him and hit him once? It's a risk you got to be willing to take. So to me, I'd probably go no. The fight doesn't go the distance, but who the fuck knows, right? But I will have to go with Baeza. I'm gonna go with round. Actually, I think he can decision him. Like for me, Baeza, when he's suffered 2 knockout losses, he's 3 fights in the hole. I really thought he was out of the UFC. He's just been out with an injury. In this spot, I think Miguel Baez is going to play pretty safe. I think he can find the finish along the way, but I think he's going to be a little bit more defensive. He's going to be a bit more tactical. He's going to use that fight IQ. He's going to use that range. It's just as long as he doesn't get clipped too hard and he keeps his distance, which I expect him to do, I think he can win this by finish along the way or more than likely a decision. I am curious, though, if Miguel Baeza is like panicking because Puna's just bum rushing him, is there a possible prop that there's going to be a point taken or maybe an eye poke? Because I think Miguel's going to be like, get away from me. I might look into that. But yeah, I'll go with Baeza. I'm not confident. I'm flip flopping back and forth because of that little chin right there. But yeah, next bout, main card, middleweight bout, Zach Reece versus Julian Marquez. Marquez minus 115. Come back on Reece is minus 105. I think I've seen Marquez like minus 140 at this point. Reason being, Marquez is, I think he's at MMA Lab right now. And I think Marquez has always had that brute strength. He's got power. He's got submission abilities. But like he came back from an injury. I think it was his arm, to the point that like his arm got super small. I forgot what the injury was. And he came back and he fought Coconut Bombs, Mackie Patolo. And Mackie was kind of whipping his ass. He hasn't looked uber impressive in quite some time. His only wins are against Mackie, no longer in the UFC, long gone from the UFC, and that was 3 years ago. And Sam Alvey, who I guess you can say that Sam Alvey is like kicking people's asses in that karate tournament bullshit. But no shame losing to Gregory Rodriguez. Both men would lose to him. And then Marc-Andre Barrios. I actually bet Marquez in that spot because I thought, he's training at Elevation at that time, Elevation Fight Team, I believe. And as long as he can maintain a good cardio, I thought that was a really good camp for him. Just like, hey, get your cardio up. You'll be able to land bombs for a longer period of time. And I think you can definitely win this fight. But, he gassed himself out and he got TKO'd against Marc-Andre. For Zach Reece, he got knocked out by going for a beautiful triangle setup off of his back. He got slammed. But, there's a lot of questions about him. Mainly my main question was, I thought he does, I know he has the skill set on the ground, right? He does have shit off of his back. He's a tall, lanky dude. He's a big dude, 6'4", 77-inch reach. Seems to have power, but he's super goofy and awkward on the feet, where he's just kind of moving like super slow motion like a fucking stick man, where I think Julian could take advantage there. My thought was he should be able to beat Cody Brundage, no problem, but he wasn't able to beat Cody Brundage. So by default, I have to go with Julian Marquez to win this fight by a knockout. I do think that if anyone can fix Julian Marquez after the whole debacle of him no longer having his coach and James Krause, where I thought that was a really good fit for him. He was at home. He was like, I think that makes a huge difference when you're in your group, your team, you're at home, you feel comfortable with your coach. And now you have to find a new coach, and that could be a huge factor as to why Julian is kind of fighting and looking a little off. But he's always had ability. He has experience. He's fought good competition to the point that like he didn't look uber shit against Hobocop. It's just more so his punches sometimes can become bear swipes where he's just like rough. And in this case, I think that if he uses his grappling and he just is smart against Zachary Reece, he can definitely land some damage from the top and then get in close and attack the body and maybe even try to knock out Zach Reece with one of those bear swipes. As for Zach Reece, I think he's got a good chance to win here too. It's a very close fight where I see the potential in Zach. He's a big boy. He is training at Bang Tao, getting better, maybe getting better at being more fluid. He just got embarrassed by Cody, the fucking loser Brundage. This could be a really good bounce back for Zach Reece if he keeps it on the outside, uses his length. It's a tough one, man. I have to say, if Zach Reese does get to the point where he's like plus 120, I have to bet Zach Reese as a like experiment. But pick wise, I'll have to go with Marquez. I'm gonna go by TKO. I'm gonna say second round, but it's a tough one. It's a real tough one. Next bout, we've got Bruno Ferreira versus Dustin Stoltzfus. Won't spend too much time on this one, not because I think this is the like uber easy outcome, because it's Bruno Ferreira minus 275. Come back on Dustin is plus 215. I have to go with Ferreira round number one, mainly because although I do think Dustin can win this fight, it's going to have to be in the later rounds. Bruno doesn't tend to get past round number one. I think he does have power. He's got a black belt in jiu-jitsu and judo. It's just that Dustin is just the kind of fighter that is the perfect foil for ruining your fucking day at betting Ferreira. Logically, you look at Ferreira, he's a jacked little guy. He's 5'10". He can hit Dustin. If Puna can hit Dustin while telegraphing those singular left punches, whether they be like a counter left or just a straight left, I think Bruno can mix things up. He moves well on the inside. Dustin, to me, he has good skills. He can wrestle. He's got good jiu-jitsu. He can take your back. He can definitely strike on the outside. He can somewhat take an ass whooping. He's never really been put out fully cold, other than a boost who kicked him in the fucking mouth and then just finished him with like a visual knockout. I think he was still conscious. It was just that Abu literally put his fucking foot in his mouth, and the ref is like, yo, that's fucked up. I better stop this ASAP. I think he was still awake. I think he does have a pretty solid chin. It's just that, to me, taking Dustin and picking Dustin is illogical. I think Bruno does have enough to knock him out and finish him in the first round. But if he doesn't, at that point, I can probably get Dustin plus 500 if Bruno kind of whips his ass and we're seeing that his chin is holding up. Bruno might gas himself out. At that point, Dustin being a bigger dude, he's solid, man. I've picked Dustin to win certain fights in the past. I actually bet him to beat Gerald Meerschaert, and he was doing really well until he fucking shit the bet against Gerald Meerschaert. But I like Ferreira pick wise. Round number one, just don't go against what's not broken. Ferreira here going in the first round, but definitely going to be looking into this live. Next bout, we've got Raul Rosas Jr. versus Ricky Turcios. Pretty Ricky versus El Niño Problema, minus 250 for Rosas. Come back on Turcios, plus 200. I've broken this one down. I'm going to go with Raul Rosas. Man, I think he can win this one by a decision here. I think Ricky really likes to play jiu-jitsu. He's not particularly that much of a threat when it comes to like the striking. He's a veteran for sure, but I've always suspected that Ricky is a magnet for left hooks. And Raul Rosas, I think with his past win against Terrence Mitchell, Terror Bear, oh boy, I think that knockout and that nastiness of him is going to serve him well here. His biggest issue is kind of pacing himself. He goes hard for these takedowns. He's a physical guy. He's a very imposing kid. He's 5'9". I just think he's going to be the more physical of the two. Ricky's more of kind of like a scarecrow, just that. Like he's kind of like a goofy little scarecrow where you can take him down, and he just tries to like maneuver himself by taking your back. But I just don't see him having that rawness from Raul Rosas to like be able to, I don't know, take advantage of like his inexperience. I think Raul's going to have that power advantage. I think he's going to not be afraid to strike with him. And Ricky maybe be shooting for takedowns where Rosas is just going to get on top of him and just ride it out, maybe take his back. I do think that Raul's going to try to strike with Ricky, try to land something on Ricky, because Ricky, man, I've seen this guy get flush hit and nearly lose fights that he should not be losing, like the last fight against Kevin Natividad, where he was getting taken down. And Kevin rocked his shit pretty bad. And I think Raul Rosas, who he still has that aura of like, I'm really good. I'm 19 years old. I'm in the UFC. I've got, how many wins does he have? 2 wins in the UFC. His only loss is to a solid guy in Christian Rodriguez, who would run a train on Ricky. And I don't mean like beating us up. I mean literally, he would get him and his homosexual friends to run a train on Ricky Turcios. Or would he? Is that just a joke? I don't know. I just think that Raul's going to have that confidence to be able to be like, oh, he's going to try to take my back. I'll just stand up because I'm stronger than him, kind of thing. As for Ricky, he's got a lot of experience. He's fought a lot of good guys. He's been lacking for me. He is a tough winner. It's just that I think there's a smart way to fight Ricky, and that is to try to knock him out. And then when he's shooting for takedowns, just be like, get the fuck off me. We'll see, though. It is still a very tough fight for a very young man in the UFC and Raul Rosas, but I'm not going to go against my pick. My initial pick was Raul initially when they were going to fight in Noche UFC last September, but I guess Rosas got sick with eating bad tacos. That's my rumor. But yeah, I'll go with Rosas. I'm actually considering parlaying him with the next fighter, Dustin Jacoby, knocking out Dominic Reyes. I just saw something that I guess Dominic was saying, like, I nearly died and I had to go day by day, not knowing if I was going to live. Jacoby minus 225, come back on Reyes plus 185. As much as I want to see Dominic Reyes get a win, like I really want to see Dominic get a win. He's out of, I think, Victorville, California, technically Hesperia, California, and I've driven to Hesperia to get parts for my vintage Mercedes, so I hold that shit dear to my heart. He's a kind of guy that, like, he's from like my neck of the woods, so I got to support this kind of dudes, but his chin is not supporting him. Man, I just think that he just doesn't have it anymore. Like him getting knocked out viciously those many times. Dustin Jacoby is, to me, one of these guys that is a habitual ball dropper sometimes in fights that he should not be losing. But in this fight, I think he's got the kickboxing advantage. I think he's going to have maybe the power advantage, maybe not the athleticism. Dominic is still very athletic. He's got a good boxing style, and he throws a lot of devastating kicks. But Jacoby, I think that inside, when he kind of not necessarily bum rushes Dominic, I don't think he needs to, because the reach advantage is not really that significant. 1 inch in height, 1 inch in reach. I think with a couple jabs and some low kicks from Dustin Jacoby, the openings are going to be there for Dominic, where to me, and I could be wrong, and I am hoping I'm wrong because I don't want to see this, but to me, a guy psychologically who's been knocked out that bad, who has not looked good in the UFC, he has to more than likely see his old tape. I think at a certain point we might see Dominic Reyes look like a deer in the headlights, just kind of freeze up. And I think that's where Dustin's going to take over, whether in the first round, the second round, or by a decision. I think Dustin Jacoby's going to win this fight just because he's been more active. He's more defensively sound, and I just don't think Dominic is going to have anything for him. I hope I'm wrong, though. I do want to see Dominic get a win, but man, with this caliber of fighters that he's fighting, granted, he fought former champs. He fought John Jones. He fought John. He fought Jury, for fuck's sake. 3 champs right then and there, and they all finished him. But that Ryan Spann fight where he got knocked out by a jab, to me, that was kind of the indication that, like, maybe Dominic just is psychologically not there anymore. And me hearing that, like, he had issues living gets me worried that he's a little bit worried about his physical state. So I think if Dustin lands something maybe not uber significant, it might just stun him mentally to the point that, like, Dustin will then at that point start landing a little bit cleaner that will lead to the knockout, maybe the TKO. We'll see, though. This could be a completely different Dominic Reyes. I think he might actually even try to wrestle with Dustin. I don't know, but it's really hard for me to see a way that Dustin loses this fight without getting, like, flash KO'd. So I'll go with Dustin, round number 1 knockout. And then main event of the evening, we've got Jared Killer Gorilla Cannonier versus Russian Sniper Nasruddin Imavov. Minus 140 for Imavov. Come back on Cannonier plus 120. To me, without taking too much time, because this is a very binary fight. Nasruddin knocks out Cannonier or just styles on him enough to win a decision. 5 rounds. They've both been 5 rounds. One more impressive than the other. Cannonier's fought the champ. He's looked good against Marvin Vettori at 5 rounds. He beat Sean Strickland in 5 rounds. The guy, even at 40 years old, and yes, he did recently suffer like an MCL tear. The amount of cardio that he has and the improving skill set that he's displayed in the UFC against good level competition has always been like very surprising to me. Like usually when you hit 40, you're not supposed to get better than what you were when you were in your early, 30s or 20s. But the guy's been like fluctuating in it from heavyweight, light heavyweight, now to middleweight, where he looks better than fucking ever. But to me, when Jared Cannonier is getting dropped by the likes of like Robert Whitaker, which is not a bad loss, but more so dropped by Marvin Vettori, who pillow fisted Goblin. I think Nasruddin, with all of his faults, and the biggest concern that I have when I will bet Nasruddin, and I'm going to bet him with the winnings I get, not the winnings, I shouldn't call it that, but the money I get from judging this Friday, I'm going to go straight to the casino and put it on Imavov. The reason I'm going with him is that he has that uber dynamic, long rangey striking that Jared has always had issues with. Like to me, I look at Dominic Reyes. That was at 205, but Dominic Reyes caught him. And I think that's what's going to happen here. I think that despite the fact that Cannonier has like a 2.5 inch reach advantage over Imavov's speed, his fucking his sniper ability is going to hurt Jared, and he's going to finish him. I think Imavov has definitely improved. His gas tank for 5 rounds is a little questionable, but the guy that I saw fight Sean Strickland and then fight Chris Curtis was like night and day. I think he's making good improvements. I think he is not afraid to get it to the ground, not afraid to wrestle, not afraid to take your back and choke you out, to the point that if he hurts Cannonier, which I do suspect he will in the first 2 rounds, I think at that point he'll finish him. If it goes beyond that, Jared, the dude is a massive, nasty man. He hits hard. He has hard low kicks. He can definitely drop some nasty ground and pound. And he does have the cardio and the wrestling ability that if Imavov slows down, he makes himself more presentable for Cannonier to land on him or get a hold of him, that it's going to be a fucking nightmare for Imavov, who, he's tough to finish. He's a tough guy. But the way he handled Roman Dolidze, nearly finished him, a guy who was uber durable. And I really thought Imavov, my initial prediction was like Imavov's going to finish him, but not by like knocking him out, just more so the doctor and or the referee's going to be like, yeah, that's too much damage. And he did lay that much damage on Dolidze. It's just that it never stopped it because Dolidze is a bad motherfucker. Also, watch your mothers around Roman because he might take him. I think Imavov's just going to be able to catch Cannonier, who your chin's not going to get better after 40. And I'm strictly basing this off of Cannonier's ability to take a shot from, dear God, from pillow-fisted Marvin Vettori. I think if Imavov lands clean on him, it's going to rock him pretty bad, and Nasruddin's not going to let him off the hook here. And he's a much younger guy, and I think he's on a roll right now. It's just, again, if Cannonier can survive, because he's a very good fighter. I'm very surprised at how much he's evolved. Yeah, shit, training out of the MMA lab. Like, that's why I kind of lean a little bit with, what's his name? Julian Marquez. Like, if anyone can fix Julian, it could be a combination of a guy like Jared Cannonier training with him and the MMA lab, very cerebral guys. But yeah, if Imavov doesn't get that finish, holy shit, Jared Cannonier can put it on him in like the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round. So I will pick Imavov first round. I am going to bet him. I know the risk that comes with Imavov because, again, I'm not taking Jared Cannonier lightly. I just am suspecting that chin is not going to be able to withstand a really clean, long shot from Imavov. Like, if he pinpoint accurately cracks him, I think Jared's going to be doing a wobble dance and it's going to get stopped. So I'm going to go with Imavov by a first-round knockout. Realistically, I think he can get it done in 2. After 2, we'll have to see if Imavov is like... because his style revolves around a lot of footwork, and it does take a lot out of him. But in those first 2 rounds, the man is spectacular. So, I'm going to take him to win. But after those first 2 rounds, if he starts huffing and puffing, then we will have to readjust at that point, maybe do some live betting. But let me know what you think in the comments about this UFC Louisville fight. 14 bouts. Again, it's going to be an interesting overall card. I did take some weird parlay there where it's kind of like they're 2 of the more riskier fights, like what the hell's his name, Ludovic Klein. I know the risk that comes with that, but the reward for that is not minus 200. And on top of that, the Daniel Marcos fight where it's a damn near pick 'em. I just think that those 2 guys are gonna excel. And then my third person that I have on that parlay was Imavov. So I have that 3-leg parlay. I'm also going to take Imavov straight. I will be tracking these this time because I'm actually home and I'll be able to, ride or die with them hoes. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments about my picks. If I'm a fucking idiot, leave it in the comments. So I will see you next week.